know your name, I swear I do. It's on the tip of my tongue. Sorry, what did you say? I've known you for how long? Your face is so familiar, but no name comes to mind. Please, can you remind me if you'll be so kind? Staring out into space, asking God to hear my case. Trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last?
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm Lori LeBay, the host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks, and I'm also a daughter that mother was on this journey for 30 years, and God bless her, she taught me so much. For those of you that are new to our show, I'm just going to do a real brief introduction because we're always getting new listeners. Bottom line, Alzheimer Speaks is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort around the world. We also help companies expand their brand and their footprint by leveraging our content to help increase access to their products, services, and tools to those in need. And boy, I know what that was like when we were a family in need. I also want to thank our audience for your loyalty and your time commitment in terms of sharing the content that we generate here on our radio show, on our blog, our YouTube channel, our website, even at our conferences. We truly believe that collaboration is the only way we're going to win this battle against dementia. And I know that it's working thanks to each and every one of you. You see, your likes, your clicks, and your shares are having a powerful impact in terms of spreading resources to those in need. And those few seconds that you take have made just a huge difference to us as a community. And I share that with all of you as well. It got us recognized by Oprah as a health hero for 2018, by Maria Shriver as an architect of change, and by Dr. Oz as the #1 influencer online. And this would not have happened with you. So I owe you each a big hug out there, and thank you for being part of our community and help raising the voice and raising awareness of dementia. I'd also just like to invite each of you to be a guest on our show. Every now and then we do open mic where you are more than welcome to call in, or any show you can also call in at 323-870-4602. That's 323-870-4602, and join the conversation. Maybe you will be a guest, and we'll feature you on the show. So reach out to me. There's a big contact button on alzheimerspeaks.com, or you can message me through the radio show here as well. Before I introduce our guest today, I'm just going to give a shout out to a couple of companies. One is the Women's Alzheimer's Movement, and Move for Minds with Maria Shriver. If you haven't heard about it, Google it, or just go to the women'salzheimersmovement.org. She is just doing incredible things in this space. And also just in the space of positivity and change and being so authentic. So check her out. And then also the American Senior Magazine has great content, large print, and it's just a wonderful publication that comes out. And you can go to the AmericanSeniorMagazine.com, or again, go to AlzheimerSpeaks.com on our homepage, and you'll see an ad there where you'll be able to get a discount. Third, I'm just going to yell out to the Purple Table Reservations. They're doing some really cool work in terms of trying to get restaurants on board to be dementia friendly. And also to work with others in need, those that are struggling with post-traumatic stress or autism. There's so many others that have similar needs when they go out into their community. So check out purpletables.com, and you'll be able to see more of what they're doing. If you're a restaurant owner or if you know of one, touch base with them, because the training is fairly easy to do, but it makes just such a huge huge difference for your patrons. Well, let's get to why we're here today. I am so excited to have Dr. Paul Nussbaum back with us. He is an international leader in brain health and brain health lifestyles. He's a guy who's been out there really living this thing for 30 years and caring for adults and older persons suffering from dementia and head injuries and neuropsychotic disorders. He's a board-certified clinical board-certified in clinical psychology and geropsychology with a specialization in neuropsychology. He is also the founder of the Brain Health Center that provides independent medical examinations, neuropsych assessments, and case management for those suffering neurological or neurobehavioral disorders. The center also serves really as an epicenter for Dr. Nussbaum's brain health lifestyles, which we're really going to talk about today. He has been published in peer-reviewed magazines, in books, in chapters within the scientific communities. He's also served on editorial boards for scientific and clinical journals. And he's written 2 books. In 2010, he wrote the book Save Your Brain, and that was named top 5 in the brain fitness by AARP. And then in 2016, he wrote What is the Purpose of My Brain? Spiritual Healing and Salvation. And it's really about, it's really a thought-provoking read on your higher power and the brain itself. I believe Dr. Nussbaum really serves as a wonderful face of brain health. And he does this publicly. He does it through companies and organizations being a bridge to the scientific world to kind of common sense implementation. So again, thrilled to have you back with us, Dr. Nussbaum. How are you today?
Hey, Lori, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show, and congratulations on all the good work with Alzheimer Speaks.
Well, thank you. We're all doing it together, that's for sure. First question I always ask everybody, and I know I've had you on a couple of times, but I'm going to ask it again because we've got some new listeners, and that is, have you been personally touched with family or friends with dementia?
Sure, both family and friends, and then, professionally over, 30 years, thousands of individuals suffering dementia of the Alzheimer's type, and really learning from their stories and the family stories. So it clearly has impacted and affected me.
Okay, great. I want to start out today because I really want to focus on brain health. There's so much yipper-yapper out there, but what the heck really does that mean, brain health?
Yeah, that's a great question. It certainly is on the radar screen, isn't it? So for all the listeners, it's important to understand that, in my opinion, the single greatest, most magnificent miracle ever designed sits right between our ears, right? And I always have fun with people. If you want to have a good, fun conversation about mobility, my goodness, what a great device we have right in our. It is the real wireless tool out there. And what we've learned is that this beautiful system that really serves as our identity and origin of every thought and emotion and movement and creation and imagination has the ability to be shaped. And we've learned that from the animal model. Now it's bridged over into the human model, the human brain. So everybody out there understand that not only is this the most complicated system ever designed, but we have it right within our grasp and our opportunity to shape this brain. And that's it can be shaped for a number of things, Lori. It can be shaped for disease. It can be shaped for violence. But today we're talking about how it can be shaped for health. And so think about brain health as a dynamic process in which the environmental input is critically important, and that which we choose to expose our brains to is critically important. So there's this wonderful marriage between ourself and the environment. And when we place our brain into environments that are stimulating, we can actually shape our brain for health all across the lifespan. And that's the exciting thing about brain health. Now, the important thing that you and I are going to talk about today is, how that happens physiologically, but the audience is going to be real interested in understanding, okay, if that's true, what do I need to do practically each and every day because I'm interested in shaping my brain for health.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's the big pitfall. It's like you get all this information and then now what?
Yeah.
Where do I go?
Right.
How do I find this? And you've made it nice and easy for people. So why don't we talk a little bit about the evolution process of brain health? This is something I personally don't think was even talked about years ago. We talked about the heart and we talked about all our other organs, but the brain, we really, in my mind, really haven't talked about, or even when you go to the doctor, there's not a test for this. So they'll check to see, are you lonely or are you depressed and those types of things, or have you been abused? But they don't really talk about the function of the brain. And maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it's happening and just not at my clinic.
No, you're absolutely right. There's a talk I gave not too long ago about the evolution of brain health, and I think there's a really interesting story there because you're exactly right, and we're not the first. The way I like to say it is we're not the first civilization to be kind of stupid with this. The Egyptians, for example, used to bury the royalty with all the organs gone but one. They left the heart in the body because they viewed the heart as the center of the universe. And in the United States of America, we're really not that different today. And when you think about it, it wasn't too long ago we celebrated a thing called Valentine's Day. And as I like to tell people, I've got some OC features. I really like to look at human behavior. And if you paid attention on that day, you probably saw a lot of guys and gals walking around with boxes, and the color was red, and they were shaped like a heart, and inside the box was a bunch of chocolate. And when we go to a restaurant, we'll see little icons on the side of the foods listed on the menu that have a little red heart, and we've done these things in a good way, but we've given meaning to the heart it really never deserved. It's important to understand that the focus and the center, the epicenter of our identity is the brain. It's where we love, it's where we emote, it's where we grieve, it's where we have joy, and all the emotions we think about really come from the brain in addition to all the thinking. So it was well known back in the 1950s, Lori, that when you place rodents in an environment where there was other rodents, where the rodent has the ability to walk fast on a wheel, and where there are toys placed in that rodent's environment, compared to rodents raised in isolation without those things, that rodent raised in what was called an enriched environment had a larger hippocampus, which is the structure in the brain so critical to new learning. It's the structure that gets hit early by Alzheimer's disease, which is why a person with Alzheimer's can't learn new information. But also the size of their brains were larger than those rodents raised in isolation. So when you think about that, what you really have is an animal model where apparently physical activity and socialization and mental stimulation are very, very important. And it really wasn't until 1998 where a paper was published that showed that the human brain can actually generate new brain cells. We call that neurogenesis is the fancy word. If you don't like that, it just means the ability to generate new brain cells. And interestingly, we found that it was the hippocampus, same structure I just mentioned, where we learn, which is the primary site for the development of new brain cells in the human brain. And so it was Marion Diamond, who was a real hero of mine, who recently passed, and PBS actually did a story on her called Our Love Affair with the Brain, who did really the pioneering work with the rodent model. And she gave a keynote address at the American Society on Aging, and I was either fortunate or unfortunate to be the guy next year to go after her, which is not an easy thing to do. But what I did with my talk was to bridge her work, which was brilliant, to trying to get everybody to understand that what we learned from her work with the rodent model could really be bridged to the human model. And that's where I branded my lifestyle, which was I took the socialization, physical activity, and mental stimulation, and I added in spirituality and nutrition and said, here we have a lifestyle blueprint. May not be perfect, but it's a path for humans to think about what how they can organize their day and what they can do a little bit each and every day within those 5 pillars of brain health to shape their brain for health. And so that really began, I wrote a book called Brain Health and Wellness in 2003, which was really a research bridging of the rodent model to the human brain, and from that then had continued my work to today, teaching people about how this thing called brain health works, what it means, how it happens at the cellular level, and then actually what you can do from a lifestyle perspective to shape the brain, to grow the brain, to have neurogenesis in the brain, and to help to build ultimately what is called brain resilience that you and I will talk about. But that's part of the evolution, and it continues today, doesn't it? When you look at all the businesses, all the language, all the commercials, all the marketing around brain health, that's really what it's been about, is that bridging from the rodent brain research to the human brain.
Well, interesting. Now, you had mentioned brain resilience. Do you want to go into that now, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, sure. So, no, that's fine. So, when I talk about shaping the brain, the word that everybody probably has seen out there, and it's technically correct, it's called plasticity, which is a brain that's highly dynamic and constantly reorganizing and malleable. And everybody can kind of relate to what I'm going to say right now. When you think about what I just described there with plasticity, I have 3 sons, and the oldest one is 27 now, so it's not that long ago, right? And when my wife gave birth to him, we read this book by this guy named Spock that probably everybody can remember. Mm-hmm. And, Spock was kind of famous, and he talked about the critical period of brain development, right? And if everybody thinks right now on your show here, as we're talking about this, what was the critical period of brain development? When was that? And in my audiences, everybody kind of gets it. They'll say something like 0 to 3 years, 0 to 5 years, and that's correct. And that's what Spock said. So this critical period of brain development, which wasn't that long ago, we used to think was 0 to kind of 3, 0 to 5 years. God only knows what happens at age 6, right? It's all downhill. But that turns out not to be true. So those years are really, really important. But the other day we celebrated my mother's 94th birthday, and fortunately she's still doing really well. And I can promise you, she's a tough Italian lady. I can promise you, she would tell everybody in your audience today, Lori, that 94 to 95 is a pretty important period of brain development too. And so one of the things to understand is the brain doesn't know its age. It just wants to be stimulated. And so by leading a brain health lifestyle, what happens is you can literally develop cells in your brain. You can increase the number of cellular connections. And if you can all picture in your mind right now, as I'm talking, a picture of a jungle where you have all these trees that are so dense that you really can't walk through the jungle because it's so dense. Imagine a brain that has so many cellular connections that it's so dense, it's so robust. Physically, that's the way it looks, but conceptually, the way we describe that is brain resilience. And if you have a brain that looks like a jungle, a disease like Alzheimer's, which you can think of as a weed whacker, and I'm not trying to be funny, but Alzheimer's basically comes into the brain and begins to weed whack all the cells, and that's not a good thing. And so when we have brains that are set up with tremendous resilience by doing certain things across our lifespan, it's not a cure. We don't have a cure. It's not even a prevention. But what it does is brain resilience permits us to delay the onset of symptoms and signs of something like Alzheimer's. So in other words, Lori, research has showed us that even in brains at autopsy well diagnosed with Alzheimer's, about 20 to 30% of those brains don't manifest memory problems in life, and we don't know how that can be. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit with what we know to be Alzheimer's. But what we think is, you get this from the Nun study, for example, is that when you lead a very sort of complex lifestyle and do some of the things we're going to talk about, you build up brain resilience that serves as kind of a natural defense. Again, eventually the disease may break through, but in some cases it doesn't, even to end of life when a person lives a long life. Some people will come up to me and say, Dr. Nussbaum, my dad was a physicist, or he was an attorney, or whatever, a well-known writer. What are you talking about? He got Alzheimer's. Why? How can that be based on what you just said? Well, I'll ask the person, tell me about when your dad manifested the symptoms of Alzheimer's, and they'll say something like late 70s, early 80s, late 80s. And I'll say to them, well, the thing that your dad did across his lifespan helped him build up sufficient resilience that the symptoms of the disease didn't manifest until that age, which is relatively late. If he hadn't done those things, that disease was there. It would have come out much earlier. And so that's one of the powers. Brain resilience is one of the powers of having a brain that can be shaped. And by you and I talking about things that we can do, we're really building up brain resilience, okay? And that's really one of the great things that we've learned because our brains have plasticity and can be shaped, that we are empowered to kind of take advantage of. And in my opinion, a nation really interested in brain health, given, what you're an expert, what you know to be with regard to our hitting the wall all the time with trying to come up with a pill to fix this complicated thing. We really need to have a society, a world, a country that is proactive with regard to living a brain health lifestyle. This stuff needs to begin while the baby is in the womb. It needs to be in our grade schools. It needs to be for kids across all the ages. It needs to be for teenagers. It needs to be for folks my age and my mother's age. And if we had a culture that was really dedicated to that, we're not going to get rid of. I'm not saying this is the cure-all, but what I'm saying is I know that we could reduce the morbidity and the emotional and financial cost that this disease is causing and will continue to cause in tsunami-like proportions here as we move forward.
I have a question for you on that. My mom had dementia for 30 years. Now, she was only diagnosed for 20 because the first 10, the doctor kept saying it was her hormones, which she knew wasn't, and we knew it wasn't. But in the autopsy report, I talked with the doctor, and he's like, Lori, rarely do we see a brain this atrophied. And he's like, but rarely do we see somebody who has lived with the symptoms this long. And one of my questions is, my mom was always really socially engaged and always kind of challenging herself. Do you think that helped her live longer and slowed the process down? Because I see a lot of people out there now with dementia are getting very active in advocacy, and they're kind of taking on a whole new life's purpose. And they're being challenged of, well, you must not have the disease because you haven't declined. Well, they've declined at home, but they get in these roles, and they're able to kind of fight off some of their symptoms. It seems to fend them off a little bit. And I'm wondering if you feel that has anything to do with that.
Yeah, no doubt. I think that did help your mom, and I think that sometimes it goes the other way too, where somebody with a whole lot of resilience can sometimes compensate for symptoms that are there, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a good thing. But no, it's certainly the brain. The brain is sometimes we forget the brain's not just a cognitive system, but doing cognitive things is really, really important. But also doing social things, doing relational things, doing things that have purpose, doing things that are spiritual in nature, reducing stress. It's a nutritional system. So all these things are really, really important. It's a complicated system that has to be sort of approached from a complicated approach in terms of lifestyle. And so no, those things clearly are helpful in my opinion. Is some of the things I speak to patients and people that call me or come to see me all the time. As a basic thing, one of the things I've grown to be more in tune with and more impressed by is this whole thing of stress and what it does to the system and to the body and to the brain. And so really trying to create lifestyles that provide us with balance is really important. And it's really, we don't talk about it in this country in terms of the brain, but it's really important for the brain as well. So I would, the long-winded answer to your question is yes, it does help.
Okay, well, great. That's what I was suspecting as well. And then I don't know, I'm just going to throw this out there. I just learned about a program they're doing in Japan called Saito. Have you heard of it? Where
I have.
They're
Go ahead.
Yeah, where they're teaching people kind of on an academic level. And I'm going to go view it probably in May and check it out myself. But what have you heard about it? I just found it kind of fascinating.
No, I haven't. It's actually was something else I thought when you first said it, but it's not what I was thinking. So I'm not real up on that one, Lori.
Okay, yeah, it's all about teaching people and trying to get them to resonate with what they once did in terms of learning fashion and stuff and kind of classroom style. And there's been some pretty interesting results with it. And I know enough to be
I'd be interested to hear what you learn.
Yeah, I know enough to be dangerous and mention it, but
I'm not up on that one.
Yeah, I figure everybody can kind of check it out themselves and come to their own opinions, and I'm sure I'll have them on the radio after I see it in action here and learn a little bit more. Back to you. Can you tell our audience what are some critical factors and terms that they need to know about brain health?
Yeah, so the one we've talked about is plasticity, which is sort of the foundation. So that just basically means your brain is this dynamic system that can be shaped. And from that, we've already used one word, which is called neurogenesis, that comes from plasticity. If a brain can be shaped, that means that one of the outcomes would be that you can develop new brain cells. And so that's called neurogenesis, the birth of new cells, neurogenesis. Another one we talked about is brain resilience. Which basically just means over a period of time you're doing things that affect your brain. So you're engaging in behaviors with your environment. It's a reciprocal sort of marriage, you and your environment. And you're doing it in a way that promotes what I always call novelty and complexity. So the new and the difficult are really good things for the brain. It might not feel that way at first, but they really are, because it builds up new synaptic, new cellular connections we call synapse, and that then builds brain resilience. And as you and I just talked about, brain resilience helps to provide a kind of a natural defense against the onset of symptoms. It doesn't mean the disease isn't there. It just means that the symptoms may not be expressed because of the resilience that you've built up based upon what you do. So those are some of the sort of the major sort of technical vocabulary that one may see out there. But for your readers and your listeners, to your show, Lori, the critical thing that kind of I want to impart with everybody today is that we have this great opportunity that we actually can affect the physiological, the physical, the structural, and the functional aspects of our brain, and that's new stuff. I mean, that wasn't, just remember what we talked about with Spock here a little bit earlier. That wasn't, 20 years ago. We didn't think that could be so. So. And it doesn't matter what age you are. It's never too late. It's never too early. It's just a matter of kind of stimulating the brain in novel and complicated ways, and in relational and social and spiritual ways that can benefit it and help build brain resilience. And all that goes into the ultimate outcome, which is called brain health.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you defining each of those one more time for us. And now, the brain health lifestyle, what does that incorporate? How much time is it going to take? How much money is it going to cost us? I know that's what's on everybody's mind. Or is this stuff that we can just really implement within our structure that isn't near as complicated or as heavy weighted as a lot of us think it is?
Yeah, those are good questions. So the one thing for everybody to understand out there, particularly in the United States of America, we tend to be a highly invasive, highly technical, highly mechanical sort of country, and we think the more the better, and the more invasive the better. And that turns out not to necessarily be true. And what we've learned over time, and it still is very, very true, is that lifestyle is the number one thing that we can change to literally reduce time of death. And there's really no pill that does that for us. So we tend to minimize it in our country. It tends not to be quick and quick fix that sometimes we search for, but it's kind of more of the marathon that it guarantees you a positive outcome every time. And that's also true for the brain. And, there's a number of different lifestyles out there that everybody can Google, and, eventually you'll get to me out there, but there's a lot of them. Each of them have a different sort of may tweak it one way or the other, and you got to be careful you don't run into just a fancy marketing scheme. I can tell you that I've spent a lot of time researching lifestyle and its impact on the brain. Again, I went back to the Rodin model and kind of built my approach, which is a 5-pillar approach, Lori. And these are not anything it's not new. Grandma taught us all this, but she didn't teach us that it would impact the brain. So these are in no special order, but the 5 really are, first of all, mental stimulation. And why is that? Because the brain is a cognitive system, and it wants to do things that are novel and complex. The things that are rote and passive are not going to be as good for the brain as something that's novel and complex. And in fact, in my talks, I show people literally what structures in the brain we use when we do things that are sort of habitual or rote and passive, and then things that are novel and complex. And trust me when I tell you, everybody, that you're going to use the most important parts of your brain when you're doing things that are novel and complex. So mental stimulation is very, very important. Physical activity is critically important. Most people probably have heard that exercise helps to reduce depression. It helps to actually even reduce the risk of dementia. And one of the reasons for that is, and a lot of people don't know this, is that every time your heart beats, 25% of the blood goes right to the brain. So even though your brain only weighs 3 pounds, it gets 25% of the blood. Now, anybody running a company out there, if I were to tell you that you're going to get 25% of the market, you'd say that's a really good thing. So that's why we got to be physically active. And sedentary behavior, Dr. Nussbaum sitting at his desk today is not going to be very good for Dr. Nussbaum's brain. So we got to get up and we got to move. And think about this from a policy perspective. I've advocated, for example, having stationary bikes in classrooms rather than kids sitting all day. And it's just little things like that we have to pay attention to because we're interested in brain health. So moving and always moving and dance and aerobic exercise and walking and all these kinds of things are really, really good for the brain. Spirituality is very, very important, and by that I mean reduction in stress. When we're under particularly chronic stress, you and I were talking about hormones a little while ago. One of the hormones that gets propagated in the body and the brain is called cortisol, and that does structural damage to that piece of the anatomy I told you about earlier, which is the hippocampus, and that's why people with chronic stress, PTSD, victims of trauma abuse, veterans with PTSD, they have memory problems. That's why it is. Interestingly, I get a lot of 50-year-olds who come into my office who think they have Alzheimer's disease, and they don't. They're just basically stressed out of their minds. They have no balance, and they're literally not remembering quite as well because of it. So the cure there is to get them back into balance, and we can do that through learning how to breathe and to literally pray on a daily basis and to meditate, and I'm a big advocate for yoga and exercise and those kinds of things, getting us back into balance. Certainly nutrition, there's a whole field called nutritional neurosciences, which is the 4th pillar of the brain health lifestyle pie. And the reason that's important is because your brain is 60% fat, 60. It's the fattest part of you, and it's the fattest part of me. A lot of people don't know that. And that fat insulates the nerve tracts. It helps to propel information more rapidly. Without that fat, sometimes called the myelin sheath, we would slow down in our thinking process. And so we want to build up, we want to eat good fats, we want to eat the proper fats, we want to eat proper foods, we want to stay away from processed foods. And there's more and more research on the Mediterranean diet, for example, has been shown to be good for the brain. And then finally, you and I were talking a little bit about this earlier, just socialization. We know there's good research that shows that particularly older brains that isolate tend to have a higher risk of dementia. And it's interesting because this goes back to the novel and complex story we've talked about, which is a brain that isolates will do isolating type activities. And we want to be engaged with others because when we do that, we communicate more, we learn more, we tell stories more, we learn new information from one another. And there's also a chemical sort of response in marriage between humans that can be powerful. We're a gregarious species. We're not supposed to be alone. So those kinds of things become very, very important as we work with loved ones and older ones who may be isolating in their room or not getting out to their activities like they used to. That does have a negative impact on the brain. So when you think about that, that's a sort of 5 buckets, 5 pillars of the brain health lifestyle: physical activity, mental stimulation, socialization, nutrition, and spirituality. And when you put those together, you can sit back and think to yourself, where am I strong here? Where am I not so strong? Where can I make some baby step changes? And because it's a marathon, It doesn't cost any money, Lori. You don't go buy this at the local grocery store or the Walmart or the Costco or wherever it is out there. You just don't. It's not on Amazon.com. You just have to think to yourself about where am I? What do I need to change? What are some things I can do to to increase a healthier level of exercise, reduce my stress? How do I relate more to other people? How do I do things that are a bit more novel, complex? Have I gotten into a rut where I'm doing the same thing all the time over and over? Do I need to make some changes? And people come up to me and say, which one's the most important? And the quick answer to that one is it varies by person, because everybody's going to have a different strength or a different weakness. And what we want to do is get some changes made in those areas of the brain health lifestyle that are weak in baby step fashion, just making some positive changes to help. And that's kind of the cool thing about it. And when you do it as a family, it can be really cool. And what I have found in my work literally across the world is kids love this, particularly when they see their heroes, their parents, their older brothers and sisters, their aunts and uncles doing this. Kids will want to do it too. And that's the way the culture begins to shape and get changed. So it doesn't cost anything, but the benefit is enormous.
Yeah, I know for myself, I have really gotten in a rut with sitting behind my computer. So we had a big snowstorm here, so it's like, that's it, I'm changing my office around. I'm going to get my high-top table back out so I can stand up, and instead of just sitting down, so I can even moving and stretching while I'm working.
Right.
Yep. It's like I feel like I've lost all muscle mass, and I'm not even 60 yet. I'm going to be 59 this June, and it's ridiculous. And the nutrition too, when I'm traveling a lot, you just kind of grab something here, and it's like I have got
it's
to
hard,
do better. Got to do better. And the mental stimulation, I think sometimes it's reframing things too, like we were talking offline. My computer crashed, and I did not appreciate having to learn 2 new editing programs all over because that challenged me. But yet,
it's not easy.
But yet, I'm a better person for it. Everything will be better in the long run. It's just
right. You did it.
It's getting well. I'm still doing it. And if you approach life as you're always learning, and that's pretty much how I have it. It makes it a little bit easier to do as well.
Yeah, good for you. That's right.
Now,
That's right.
I've heard a lot too. Just recently, probably in the last 6 months to the year, there's been a lot more talk about sleep too, in terms of being part of a healthy lifestyle. What's your thought about sleep patterns and need for sleep?
Yeah, so sleep is critical, and I put it within my within each of the slices of the brain health pie that I have. There are specific research-based activities that one could do. Sleep would fall within the spirituality set for me, because it's about balance and about reducing stress. So when we sleep, and we sleep well, we literally have a very active time for the brain. It's regenerative, it's restorative. It really, and it does more than that. So, for example, people laugh at this, but research indicates that you try to sleep on your side more than not, and because what happens is it appears that we have within our brain the buildup of toxins that need to be cleansed out through systems in the brain that permit that cleansing, and it occurs during sleep. So, and it's those toxins that help to build up plaque over time, the same plaque that's in the brains of Alzheimer's. So researchers are finding that people with better sleep cycles, deeper sleep, tend to remove those toxins, those kinds of proteins that can build up in our brain more efficiently than if we don't sleep on our side. And so just little practical tips like that help to cleanse the brain and keep it free of these toxins. Certainly more sleep is in deeper sleep helps us to encode information that we learn during the day, so it's an active time for memory processing. It's actually called memory consolidation, making what you learn during the day more deeply encoded into the brain. So, and it's restorative throughout the entire body. People that sleep more tend to have lower risk of obesity, for example. So there's just all kinds of things that happen hormonally and through a cleansing process in the brain during sleep that are incredibly valuable. So sleep behavior is very, very important. There's about 35 million Americans with sleep disorder, so it's a big issue out there, and it has all kind of ramifications for the health of us.
Yeah, I was up late, couldn't sleep one night watching, I don't know, just yappy TV, and there was somebody on there talking about how we as a society, hit that 10-minute, 15-minute pause, and that is like one of the worst things we can do. And I've kind of been watching myself when I do that. I do get up more tired than if I would have just got up.
Right.
And they had some whole scientific, thing about it, which I didn't grab hold of. I just remember that was not healthy for us, and it really wasn't doing us any favors.
Right.
In the
And
long run.
The cool thing about this is if we eat a bit healthier, all of us, starting with me, and if we exercise a bit more, and we do work on our brain a bit more in terms of the novel and the complex, the sleep will come right along with that. So you'll actually see changes, positive changes for sleep. And when obviously one of the big things that we have in terms of keeping all of us up at night is rumination, right? So the pillow in the bed for some reason has become the epicenter for solving the world's problems for the United States of America. So those of us that live here. So, it's not the best place for us to kind of try to solve all the world's problems. So when we generate the opportunity for our brain to be in more balance, we won't be as anxious at night when we go to sleep.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and just that whole, for me, like I'm bad. I have my phone right by my bedside, which they say you shouldn't do. But a friend of mine said, well, put the yellow screen on. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, oh, go to your settings. There's a thing for the yellow screen. And so at 9:00 at night, I set it for that till morning, and it does help. It's not as great if I am looking at it, and I. Some days I'm better than not staying off it, and other days I'm just bad.
Right.
But
no, that's right.
But the first step is being conscious of it, and
right. That's right. That's exactly right.
And having a conversation not only with yourself but with others, kind of coming out of the closet with this stuff.
Yep.
Now you also have other services besides you're at your brain health center. You also do a lot of keynotes and consulting. Is that correct?
I do. So I've been fortunate to be sort of the face and the personality of a number of larger organizations inside and outside of healthcare for brain health. So you and I were talking earlier about the evolution of brain health has found its way into the education world, the business world. I did some work with MetLife. I've done work with a lot of schools across the country. The largest audience I was ever in front of was 15,000 children, which was kind of cool, talking about the things we're talking about right now. And that's taught me that kids are really into this. They'll get it. They'll listen, and then they'll try to do some really neat things at their school, like have science fairs and brain health days at their school, and so that's really been cool to watch. And then certainly within senior care, I was fortunate to be the National Director of Brain Health for Emeritus. That was bought by Brookdale, and then served for a little while at Brookdale as a National Director of Brain Health, and recently now working as a clinical director for WellCore, which is a company that's a national company that's bringing comprehensive psychological services to older adults living in senior care. And then I know, Lori, you've made friends with the folks at the RC21X, which is a digital company that helps the consumer sort of monitor their cognitive and motor functions using an app called Roberto, which is pretty neat. And that, again, you and I talked about evolution. Look at how brain health has made its way into the digital world. I co-founded another company called FitBrains that Rosetta Stone bought. And these are all just tools and ways that the consumer can do the novel and complex. So I tend to stay pretty busy, similar to you, Lori. But the bottom line is trying to do what? It's trying to do something very basic, which is to educate everybody who wants to listen about the miracle that sits between their ears, and then helping people understand the practical steps they can take to shape the miracle, their human brain, for health all across their lifespan. And why do we want to do that? Because we want to build brain resilience. And what does that permit us? For me, the bottom line is it permits us access to our life story. and that's the thing we don't want to lose, is access to our life story. And if me personally, if I'm going to lose access to my life story because of something like Alzheimer's, I want to try to do what I can do to push that time off as long as I can. And so empowering people through education and through resources and through motivation and building self-esteem around doing some of these things to make all of us, feel better when we change our lifestyle is, I think, incredibly important.
Yeah, I agree. I was just popping around on your website, and he's got just some great documents and information on here. And one of the things that I didn't mention, but that I think is really important, is Dr. Nussbaum is one of only 53 board-certified psychologists. I mean, that number it amazes me because the need is so high. Our populations are aging at just a rapid rate that we've known is going to happen all along, and yet there's only 53 of you. That just shocks me.
Yeah, it's there may be a little bit more since I put it up there, but it's actually I say that not to sort of beat my chest, but to actually sort of underscore how sad it is. It's wonderful to be only one of whatever, less than 100, but it's also sad. And we have the same, this, Lori, we also have the same problem with geriatricians. We just don't have enough. And, think culturally for a minute. In Pittsburgh, and I think you told me you're from Minnesota. It's a great medical town. Yep. Think everybody out there, wherever you are listening to this show, think for a second, do you have a children's hospital in your city? And I hope you do. We have a great one here. Now, do you have whatever you want to call it, an older adult hospital? Well, you don't, and I don't either. And there's, why can a pediatrician be a primary care physician, but a geriatrician can't? There's just little things that our society sort of does behaviorally that says we don't value the older adult as much as we need to. And you're right. Lori can cite, for everybody listening, Lori can cite the statistics on this. The number of older adults that we have defined as over 65, which may not even be valid, but let's use that as a cutoff, 65 and over, is growing faster than any other part of our age cohort in the country. And both in terms of folks that are living long and healthy, and also in terms of people that may be suffering disease, such as Alzheimer's. Those numbers are going through the roof, and we really have to change quickly in this country, our mindset and our approach, our respect, create resources and facilities, and incentivize the young, smart people out there to get into fields to take care and to help and to build new things and new ways of helping and living as we get older. But until we do that, we're going to continue to have the issue in 2018 that we only have 60 or so board-certified geropsychologists, and geriatricians are just nowhere to be found. Geriatric psychiatrists are nowhere to be found, on and on and on. So this is something, hopefully the tsunami of older individuals are going to change at the policy level, but it's something that really needs to be addressed, and we need to kind of wake up. Our leaders need to wake up a bit and get this moving forward. I tend to think it'd be more of a grassroots effort that'll get this changed, though.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. We were talking again offline about the lack of geri psych units out there, and the demand for them, and the ripple effect of the healthcare costs is phenomenal, because it's not just that person; it's their family. The stress levels go through the roof, which trigger other health issues. I mean, it's not a good situation, and it's not healthy, and it's not respectful to anybody involved. And so, this is something that needs greater attention, and and we're getting a lot more attention than what we were in terms of dementia as a whole. But we're just at the baby steps, really, even though we've seen huge strides in the last 5 years compared to the prior years. We weren't moving at all. There's still so much to do, and so many unmet needs out there, and so many things to explore. Because again, like you said, we don't know what causes it. So if you don't know what causes it, you can't really get a cure for it.
Right.
And the therapies we're trying, everything is pretty much experimental and needs to be evaluated. And we're starting to create, I think, some great wealth in terms of therapies and what's working and what's not. One thing I wanted to ask you, and I forgot way back when, but I guess I'm going to back up a second. You had mentioned the NUN study, and not everybody in our audience knows about the NUN study. Can you just highlight that briefly? We've got about 10 minutes here left.
Yeah, so there was a scholar by the name of Davis Snowden. He's a PhD, and he did some work on looking at the brains of nuns, but literally nuns. And he it's an interesting way to do it because it's a cohort that's you have controls, right? So they all live together. They don't get married. They don't have babies. They eat the same things. They kind of engage in the same daily routine. So it's a very controlled sample. And so he followed their lifestyle, and he gave them sort of psychological tests and personality tests over time. And then when they died, a number of these nuns donated their brains, and so he had the autopsy measures of plaques and tangles and those kinds of things. And he found some really interesting thing. Number one, nuns tend not to get Alzheimer's disease at the same rate, so they get Alzheimer's less than females who are not nuns in the general population. And he was finding some things such as level of language sophistication early in life, reduce the overall amount of plaques and tangles in the brain. And so this was at about the age of 18 because these nuns kept diaries. And so he had ways of measuring, for example, the number of ideas in each sentence. And that correlated very strongly, predicted the number of plaques and tangles at autopsy. So something like language development we don't think of as a brain health promoting exercise the way we need to. And there's some other interesting corollary studies in terms of number of languages tend to reduce the risk of dementia that fits into that. The other thing he found was, which I thought was interesting on the personality profiles, the nuns that were more passionate tended to live longer. So there was a way to measure sort of passion. But that's known as the NUN study, and it was one of the early studies that went after this idea of brain resilience and the idea of that things from a lifestyle perspective have real meaning, and nuns tend to stay not just busy, but busy in very complicated pursuits. And so that and a number of other things really taught us that what we do early in life can be very, very powerful to what our brain looks like later in life. And that a lot of times it has to do with things that like learning and lifestyle kinds of behaviors and socialization and those kinds of things that we never thought of as being very, very important from a physical perspective on the structure and function of the brain. But that's the NUN study. You can literally, your listeners can literally look it up. There's a wonderful book called Aging with Grace by Snowden that I have in my office, and it goes over aspects of that study.
Okay, great. What would you like, is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about their brains and brain health? Any last minute tips or comments for them?
No, I would encourage everybody to think about what we talked about today, to spend some time getting to know about this part of your body, even though, as Lori indicated, our culture and by history we haven't spent a lot of time on the brain. Sometimes we think it's too complicated, but it really is. It's an exploration of oneself, and there can be no greater worthwhile endeavor than to learn about oneself. And so, there's a number of different ways to do that. Certainly at my website, which is brainhealthctr.com, there's a lot of free information there. There's some illustrations and graphs and things that you can look at in terms of the kinds of structures and what they're responsible for, and there's some articles there. And basically the idea is just to get people educated on this structure, how it works, what brain health is all about, and then really kind of trying to lead this lifestyle that we talked about. And again, everybody, think about it in terms of you wanting to maintain access to your life story to share with your kids and grandkids and great-grandkids one day. So that's the incentive. There can be no more important thing than that.
Agree. Well, people can reach you at your website, which is brainhealthctr.com for center, brainhealthctr.com, or they can email you at drnuss for Dr. Nuss at me.com, nuss@me.com. And then you will also have a Twitter handle, which is the same as your website, Brain Health CTR, Brain Health CTR, if you are interested in getting more information. And did you want to give a phone number out too, or?
Sure. Yeah, my center is 724-719-2833. And I get about across the nation, so if there's an inquiry or a question, people can call.
Okay, great. So that's 724-719-2833. Well, again, I thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate all your insights, and hopefully your listeners will join me in trying to be a little more active in a brain health lifestyle. I know that's something that I've formally committed to now, so we shall see how I do. But I feel like I'm on the right path. I think I hit my pain point enough. and it's time to make a change. In wrapping up, I also just want to give a shout out to Calendar Cards, who has a wonderful memory system that helps people manage their days. And they also host the Memory Cafe directory, which is wonderful. And you can just go to memorycafedirectory.com to find out about all the cafes. We're pushing 500 of them now in the U.S., and then also get access to calendar cards as well. If you have maybe a loved one or a client who you're worried about wandering away, you might want to check out the Call Alert Center. Again, if you go to my homepage at alzheimerspeaks.com, you will see a banner for them, and you'll be able to get a 20% discount. And it's actually a very minor fee. It's under like $15 a year, just to be prepared, just in case something would happen, because we never know when something like that could hit. And in the meantime, everybody stay safe. I know we're having some wacky weather out there, but spring is coming. I'm a believer. So stay safe. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Nussbaum, for being with us. Appreciate your time. Till next time.
Thanks, Lori.
Talk
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye-bye.
Hi, this is Suzanne Newman, host of the Answers for Elders podcast and radio show. We are the North Star that guides you through the complicated journey of senior care with trusted experts in money, law, living solutions, and more. So join us on this station, your favorite podcast channel, or just go to AnswersForElders.com. Meet the Wayshowers who will help your journey a lot easier.